So we're transcending the political money system, which puts the credit power in the hands of a few, mainly the large banks, and we're seeing the end of physical money and realizing that money is nothing but an accounting system, and we can do this accounting without the imposition of interest. You know, banks like to talk about money as if it were still a thing, and that is one way of justifying the interest burden that they attach to a loan. But when a bank makes a loan, they're not giving up anything. It's a common misconception that banks take deposits from some and lend out those deposits to others who need to borrow. That's not the way it works. Actually, when a bank makes a loan, it actually creates new money on the basis of the collateral assets that are attached to that loan.
The single legal tender, to ways of people exchanging value that are outside of that system, I mean, isn't that going to be seen as threatening to kind of the powers that be and the institutions that currently exist?
Well, I think the powers that be are beginning to realize that the game that they've been playing is not sustainable. And as we all realize that this system is not sustainable, I think people will begin to support it rather than oppose it. Even the bankers, there's no point in being in command of a sinking ship. So they simply have to realize that this cannot be continued. Right now the government is propping up the banking system by buying its toxic debt and using money that is created out of thin air to do that. Well, you're going to reach the limits beyond which government can no longer do that. When we see the inflation of prices kick in, as I described earlier, then everybody's going to realize that this system needs to be redesigned and redeveloped.
Isn't it most likely, though, I mean, people talk about, and you talk about in your book, I think, the one world currency concept, that there's going to be all sorts of attempts to, you know, for those people who have the power and the privilege, they're going to, you know, do whatever they can to maintain that system.
Yes, they probably will. They will try to correct the system in any way that they can, and all they seem to know is further centralization of power and concentration of wealth. This is what the system has been doing for decades and in fact centuries, and so they will continue to move in that same direction. Instead of letting the U.S. economy fail, instead of letting the U.S. banking system fail, they will try to enlarge the scope and create a world banking and a world monetary system. But that will simply delay the day of reckoning. We've gone through this before when we centralized banking in the United States under the central bank. So now the whole system is threatened, not just individual banks, but the whole system.
Why is there such a lack of awareness that you know, we could make a change such as this? I mean, most people, you know, I mean, I think even until this conference, the Economics of Peace, you know, even progressives like people from the Rudolf Steiner Foundation or Bali hadn't really even conceived that the problem might require a systemic transition in you know, money paradigm.
Well, we all grow up in an atmosphere where we're using money every day and we just take it for granted. So people don't question it, they just take it as part of the landscape and never imagine that there could be anything wrong with it. Even though they feel the effects, they don't know the source of their discomfort. So up to now, people haven't questioned it, but as the economy malfunctions more and more, people begin to scratch their heads and wonder what's going on. What are the root causes of these difficulties, and why are they becoming more extreme than they were before? So my work, for example, is getting a lot more attention now since last September, when the banking system almost crashed and the economy almost crashed. And the government and the Federal Reserve, they stepped in with palliative measures to put the economy on life support. But, you know, palliative measures may work in the short run to keep the patient from dying, but in the long run you have to correct the basic problems that led to to the crisis in the first place. It's like you have a patient that's a smoker, long-time smoker, obese, never gets any exercise, has a heart attack, he goes into the hospital. Yes, you have to palliate those symptoms. You have to do what you can to keep the patient alive. But eventually the solution to the problem is he has to stop smoking, he has to eat right, he has to get exercise and live a healthy lifestyle. And that's the way it is with our economy. You know, we have to get beyond the dysfunctional money and banking system that's been causing these problems.
What about, I mean, how important is relocalization in this process?
Relocalization is extremely important. You know, I've been a decentralist for a long time, believing that power must devolve to the local communities. You know, there's a saying that says all politics is local. Well, not only politics, but economics is local as well. It's the cities that are the economic engines that not only produce goods and services, but also they're the crucible in which creativity and technological development occurs. So cities and the city regions around them are the salient economic entities, and national economies are simply an aggregation of city economies. We've let too much power migrate to the federal level away from the state and local levels, and we've let too much wealth be concentrated in too few hands. So you have enormous wealth on the one hand and dire want on the other. We haven't seen it so much in this country because we've been able to export the pain to foreign countries that we've been exploiting, taking their raw materials, taking their cheap labor, getting the cheap manufactured goods from them, and basically paying them with IOUs. We've run a chronic trade deficit for many years now, and we've run the budget deficits for many years. Very few years in our history have we had a budget surplus at the federal government level. So these things are all beginning to catch up with us, and I think we've, as George Soros says, reached the end of an era. So power has to devolve to the local level. Local communities have to take more responsibility for their own economic well-being and their own quality of life generally. And the way we do this, I think, is by reclaiming the credit commons. Instead of giving our credit to the banks and letting them decide how it's going to be allocated and on what terms, we can give each other credit within mutual credit clearing circles that we organize in our local communities. And there are plenty of good models to look at where this has been done and is being done currently. The two that I point to generally are, first of all, the Viva Cooperative Business Circle in Switzerland, that's WIR, and that was organized 75 years ago in the midst of the Great Depression. And small and medium-sized businesses in Switzerland were suffering because they didn't have enough money to transact business. Swiss francs were in short supply, just as US dollars were at that time. So the business community got together and they figured out that they could do this direct credit clearing between buyers and sellers and basically trade without the use of conventional money. As I described it earlier, sellers get a credit, buyers get a debit. And in the long run, your account will fluctuate around zero. Sometimes you'll be in the positive, sometimes in the negative. So that's one example. The VIR has been operating successfully now for 75 years. And the last figures I have indicate that there are 60,000 business members in this VIR cooperative circle throughout Switzerland, and they're transacting about $2 billion US equivalent in trade every year. The other example is the commercial trade exchanges that have been operated on a for-profit basis. These are sometimes called barter exchanges, and there are dozens, hundreds of these around the world, probably 100 in the United States alone. And these are for-profit businesses that provide this credit clearing service for mostly retail, but some wholesale and manufacturing businesses as well, and service providers also. So we have plenty of experience to look to and plenty of success stories that demonstrate this concept. All we need to do now is to proliferate these credit clearing exchanges